Have you ever wondered what the difference is between a normal diet and a triathlete's diet? Join me as I take on the challenge of eating like a triathlete for 30 days and let's see what happens. Here are the results, and I can't wait to see what they say. So what does it mean to eat like a triathlete for 30 days? Well, for starters, triathletes don't think about food as a diet. They think about food as fuel to fuel the exercise they're about to do. So when you break a race down, you're always thinking about what does my body need for the next hour of activity. Sometimes you even break it down to what does my body need for the next 15 minutes of activity, especially when you're training and racing at the Ironman level and you've been out on the course for anywhere from 6 to 16, 17 hours. You need to be thinking about how to fuel your body for the next hour. And that's dramatically different than just thinking, okay, I'm going to go on a specific type of diet and try to manage my calorie intakes, because your calorie intake is different based on the needs of what you need to fuel your body as an athlete. Something that surprises a lot of beginner triathletes is that we eat things that are highly glycemic, meaning that they convert to body sugar very quickly and give your body fuel that it needs to perform. So I know when I talk to a lot of beginner triathletes and I tell them that there's Coca-Cola on every run course, whether it's a marathon or an Ironman, whenever you're doing a running race, there's always Coca-Cola there because Coca-Cola is highly glycemic. It is a liquid-based sugar fuel source that's going to fuel your body once you've depleted all the glycogen, which is the blood sugar available to your body from the food that you've eaten in the last 24 hours. But once that's gone, and that's typically about 60 minutes worth of fuel, you need to start fueling your body to continue to exercise. And if you don't, your body is going to start cannibalizing your lean muscle mass, not your fat, for fuel. It's because of where your body is and where your metabolic rate is as you exercise as an athlete. So foods that we typically think are bad for us, like Coca-Cola or say a bagel, which would easily convert to sugar, which would convert to fat if we had a sedentary lifestyle. When you're exercising as an athlete and you're performing, you need fuel that's going to quickly go through your stomach wall, fuel that's quickly going to break down into sugar rather than have a lot of fiber with it that's going to slow down the metabolic rate of transfer from food or fuel through your stomach wall into your bloodstream. Now, the problem with this challenge to start with is that we have to start tracking certain metrics so that we have a base rate understanding of how many calories our body consumes every day. So I went to my old watch, my Polar V800, which is a triathlon specific watch. This model is about 15 years old, and this comes with a heart rate strap that measures your heart rate. This watch also, when I plug in my details as an athlete, it knows who I am as an athlete and how much I'm exercising. So I thought that the calculations from Polar Flow, which is the app that comes with this watch, might perform differently than, let's say, my Apple Watch, which is new technology and is going to give me a bit of a different rate when it comes to calories burned. And it really was interesting because the Polar Flow, actually, for almost every workout that I did, it indicated that I was burning about 200 calories fewer than what my Apple Watch was telling me, which made me stop and think, because that's a problem. I can't have two devices that are giving me inconsistent information. So I then went to a calorie burn calculator online, and based on my age and my activity level and the amount of exercise that I was doing and my average heart rate for that exercise period, it turns out that the Apple Watch was actually more consistent than the Polar V800 for calories burned, if I'm to believe the math and the new science and the new technology. I think that's really interesting because For the longest time, I assumed that because this watch cost more back in the day, that it was giving me more accurate results. But I think with today's technology, the Apple Watch is actually giving me more accurate information. Now, I did do some tests where I wore both the Apple Watch and the V800 on the same wrist while I was working out, and they were within a beat or two for my average heart rate. So I felt really good about the average heart rate that it was giving me, but I was really, I was challenged by the numbers it was giving me back as far as calories burned through exercise. So one of the problems that this challenge creates is that you've got to understand the math. And some of the math behind weight loss is, well, 1 pound of fat equals 3,500 calories. Now, the question becomes, how many calories a day does my body burn just existing without factoring in exercise? So if you go to the charts, the statistics, it says that for somebody of my age, I'm 58 years old, I'm 192 pounds, that for my age and weight, that I would normally burn on average about 2,200 calories a day just to survive. That number is important, and we have to come back and verify that number. So after 30 days of tracking both the exercise that I do and the calories that I consume, and do the math and subtract the exercise calories from the living calories, it actually gives me a number very close to 2,200 calories. I was actually 2,282. So I stuck with 2,200 because I like to err on the side of caution, a little bit lower rather than a little bit higher. So once I understood my BMR, my basal metabolic rate, now I knew how many calories a day I was burning. The next thing I had to do is now enter into some sort of a spreadsheet how many calories was I eating every day, and I used MyFitnessPal to do that. MyFitnessPal is a free app that you can download just to track for 30 days the food that you're eating. And I mean track the food that you're eating. I didn't go to the level of weighing food, but I did calculate the calories and the meal size and the portion size of what I was eating. And it gave me really good insights within, I would say, 10 to 20% accuracy of what I was eating at every meal throughout the day. And rather than thinking about my meal plan as a diet, I thought of my meal plan as, I've got 2,000 calories to work with today. When am I going to eat them? When am I going to eat them around the exercise that I'm doing? And what that helped me understand is how to make better choices throughout the day when it came to eating. It made me think about how I prepared my meals so that I was getting a well-rounded meal that had 30% protein, that had 40% vegetables, and had another, say, 30 to 25% carbohydrates that are going to convert to sugar, that's going to convert to helping me have glycogen in my bloodstream to fuel the exercise that I'm going to do. So I started thinking about, what do I need before I work out in the morning if I'm doing a long workout? What do I need during my exercise? What do I need post-recovery from exercise? When is my next meal going to be? What am I going to eat for that meal that's going to stay within that 500 calorie range? What am I going to eat for dinner that's going to stay within that 500 calorie range? Now, that's not saying that I'm on a Mediterranean diet or some other type of diet. What it's simply saying is, how much lean protein am I giving my body to both sustain activity and grow muscle mass as I perform as an athlete? And am I giving myself enough nutritionally dense foods in those vegetables? And am I giving myself enough carbohydrates to sustain the exercise that I'm about to do? So this is the math equation we had to think about. So because I started tracking the numbers, I started tracking my calories burned with my calories consumed. And I knew that I had to work it out so that over the course of 30 days, I was going to try to lose 5 pounds. That meant I had to be in a 500 calorie deficit almost every day to achieve that goal. And tracking these things in a spreadsheet really gives you a sense of am I on track? And there were some days when I was calorie neutral. There were some days when I was in a calorie deficit of 600, 700, 800 calories. I did what felt right for my body, because you'll know as an athlete if you're getting enough fuel to perform, or if you're getting enough fuel so that you aren't getting hangry all the time. And there's a fine line there, but I think the mistake that most new triathletes make is they start exercising on a daily basis. They start exercising for even an hour on a daily basis, and they think that that gives them the license to go out and eat whatever they want mindlessly. And that is the secret, is you can't eat mindlessly to fuel yourself as an athlete and expect to achieve your weight loss goals. You have to pay attention to the numbers and the math. If you do things right and follow the process, it will work out in your favor. So I'm taking a look right now at my first DEXA scan, which is a body composition scan. I had this done on day 1, and the numbers show that my percentage of body fat around my trunk, my waist area, which is where I feel the most concern is, was 30.9% fat. And my total body fat was 24.2%. That was up significantly from the last time I had a DEXA scan done, which was 10 years prior, and I was in peak Ironman fitness level for myself. And I had actually jumped up from 175 pounds now up to 192 pounds. Why? Because I'm simply eating mindlessly and not eating like a triathlete. I'm eating like a regular human being, and I'm allowing myself to have a couple of beers, have a couple of glasses of wine, have those social drinks, have that social food, and just not think about what I'm eating for any specific reason. I look reasonably fit, therefore I feel like I can eat whatever I want to. But that's a huge mistake. So one of the challenges that you're going to face if you're going to try to attempt a challenge like this yourself is that when you guesstimate how many calories you think you've burned, or when you guesstimate how many calories you think you're eating, typically that leads to frustration, because that is not an accurate way of measuring where you are and what you're actually consuming and what you're actually burning. Perceived exercise rate is something that a lot of athletes use who don't have technology to just go, I feel like I worked hard, therefore I probably burned a whole bunch of calories, therefore I deserve to have that milkshake or that cookie or whatever, that piece of cake. And, I always say as an athlete, if you pay attention to the details, you can have your cake and eat it too. Just don't have your cake for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And what that simply means is pay attention to the calories that you're eating and allow yourself to have a treat every now and then. That's, I think, a sustainable process that's going to allow you not only to lose your weight that you're trying to lose, but then sustain that weight that you want to manage at once you get to that point. So over the course of 30 days, I had some real life challenges that popped up. I had to help my daughter move up north for her new job, and that was a 3-hour drive away. Actually, it was a 4-hour drive away because we drove through a snowstorm both ways, which impacted my ability to exercise. So I had to adapt on the fly. I had to change the way I was exercising because I was on the road for 3 days with travel. That doesn't mean that I wasn't still paying attention to my diet and what I was eating. I think the key here is that once you have a sense of what 500 calories looks like, you can start thinking about, okay, am I going to have 4 pieces of pizza, or am I going to have 2 pieces of pizza? Am I going to have 2 helpings of pasta, or am I going to have 1 helping of pasta? Or am I going to choose something that's more nutritionally dense? Am I going to have a piece of steak with nutritionally dense vegetables? Or am I going to, get a pasta dish off the menu when I pull up to that drive-through restaurant? Every time you travel, that presents a new challenge because it takes the food element out of the equation and just kind of throws it into the mix and says, here, you're going to have whatever, wherever you stop, this is what you get to choose from. And it really makes you stop and look and think. One of the things that I try to do is, especially if we're on the road, I don't care if I have to eat at a fast food restaurant, I have to eat, but I will look at the calorie counts for the foods if they're presented on the menu, and make a choice based on what has 500 calories, what has protein in it. And I think if you come from that perspective of just thinking, I want to try to manage my meals to 500-600 calories, depending if you're trying to maintain or sustain or lose weight, depending on where your goals are. But if you think of it in those terms, it really helps you make informed choices that are going to help you reach your goals at the end of the day. So it's not so much about being rigid with the foods that you eat, it's being more informed about the types of food that you eat and making sure that you're getting enough protein, nutritionally dense vegetables, and some carbohydrates to fuel your activity. So after 30 days, we have the results, and the results are actually quite interesting. So we went from first of all, let's just start with the basic math. The basic math says that I should have lost 5 pounds over the course of 30 days based on what I consumed. But there is a margin of error there. And I think, because I wasn't weighing everything specifically, but I was trying to stay within a certain calorie count, I think I did a pretty good job of measuring. But again, this is perceived, not weighed values. So when I perceived that I had eaten, I guess I would measure a cup of rice. I would measure a cup of cereal. I would measure a cup of whatever, put that in the bowl, and I would look at it and go, okay, that's what a cup looks like when it's a cup of cooked rice. I didn't measure it every single time, but I went for that same sort of, okay, I know what that should look like. A cup is basically a baseball, a fist size of something on your plate. And I think when I stuck to that rule, it gives you a little wiggle room of margin of error. So I think when I do the math, and you can see here on the spreadsheet, over the course of 30 days, the math says I should have lost 5 pounds of body fat over 30 days. But you also have to remember that when you're exercising, you're also building lean muscle mass, and lean muscle mass weighs more than fat. Therefore, your scale may not be accurate in the results you're looking for. In order to get accurate results, you've got to look at something more scientific like a DEXA scan, which gives you your body composition for fat composition throughout your body. So again, looking at my results from day 1 to day 30, my trunk, I went from 30.9% body fat on my trunk to 24.1% body fat. The total amount of body fat that I was carrying was 24.2%, and now I'm at 19.8%. So almost a 5% reduction in overall body fat across my body. Now, it does show from my weight that I only lost 3 pounds, not 5 pounds. But again, there might be compensation for gaining some lean muscle mass in that time. But where I really started to notice it is I started to notice it in my trunk, in my belly. And that to me is backed up by the DEXA scan that says, yeah, if I continue on this plan, if I continue down this process, I'm going to continue to lose body fat in my waist. And a lot of that has to do with how I'm eating and paying attention to the details. So the bottom line here is it's very easy to manage your weight if you make informed decisions. And the key to this weight loss challenge was to see if I could actually lose 5 pounds of body fat in 30 days. Well, we assume that the scale is measuring fat, and it's not. The scale is measuring, could be water weight, could be, whatever's in your bowels. There's a number of factors that cause your scale to give you misinformation. So I think taking the scale results along with something more scientific like a DEXA scan actually gives you the results that you're looking for that says, yeah, you're on the right path. Remember, being a triathlete is all about following a process. And if you follow that process long enough, it's going to take you to where you want to go. But you always have to pick your head up and look around and make sure that the process you're following is giving you the results that you're looking for. So if you want to try taking on this challenge, I would suggest that you also start looking at the numbers, start recording your calories consumed, start recording your calories burned, and start looking at how am I going to fuel myself for 3 to 4 meals throughout the day. I typically go with 4 meals a day, a post-exercise recovery meal in the morning after my workout, which is 500 calories or fewer. It's usually about 400 calories, and it's a post-recovery smoothie followed by a cappuccino. I have 500 calories to work with at lunch, I have 500 calories to work with at dinner, and I eat a 500 calorie snack at the end of the day about 10 o'clock before I go to bed. That is my 2,000 calories that I work with throughout the day. By breaking it up into 4 meals, I don't feel ravenous at the end of the day every day. I know I've got a snack that I'm looking forward to, and that snack typically isn't a bag of chips. However, I will say during this challenge, I did have cheat days where I did eat chips. I did drink a glass of wine. So you can live your life. Just, be aware. And I think the best way to be aware is to make informed decisions. And to make informed decisions, you have to have the facts. This exercise was all about, this 30-day challenge was all about getting the facts. And if you sit down and think about the way that I did this, break down how many calories you're burning, how many calories you're consuming, use MyFitnessPal to track that, start to understand what 500 calories looks like for a meal, and then ask yourself, can I sustain myself on that? Is this realistic? And once you start doing that, you're going to find that you're going to get to where you want to be. And then once you get to your ideal weight, then you can start bumping up your calories. And this is important as a triathlete, is it's okay during the off season or in the beginning of your training season to try to dial back and cut back your weight, because you have room to not meet your caloric daily needs based on the high volume of exercise you're going to be doing later in the training season. This is a good time of year to start doing some calorie cuts if you need to shed a few pounds. But as you get deeper into the training season, you're going to have to eat to fuel your exercise. And you cannot shortcut that. When you're doing a 3 or 4 or 5 hour bike ride, when you're doing a 2-hour run, you have to eat to fuel that exercise. So you can't skimp on the recovery, you can't skimp on the during the exercise nutrition. You have to factor all of that into your daily plan. And I think the older you get, the more you start to think about, how do I need to do this effectively and efficiently so that I get to the goal that I want to achieve? So hopefully that was informative. I hope it was. I feel better after the last 30 days. I'm going to continue this trajectory for another 30 days and see where I am and see if I'm getting closer to that 180 goal, which is where I want to be. Right now I'm at 189. I think it's going to take me about 2 more months to get closer to 180, but I definitely feel it in my gut. And that's really, really important because I don't want to be carrying that extra weight on race day. So if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like to learn more about what I put together here on my spreadsheet, how I did it, just let me know in the comments and we can continue that there. If you haven't subscribed already, hopefully you will. This is a channel for beginner triathletes who are going to have a million different questions, and I'm just trying to answer them as best as I can. So thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now. What do you think, Ralph? Was that a good one? Oh, was it super boring? I don't know. I think it was a good video. What do you think? You don't look impressed.